Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to part two of the Cheyenne restoration. And I've actually skipped ahead a little bit here. I didn't record the sanding and Bondo. I didn't feel a need to do it. I wanted to get it done real quick. You've seen all that stuff before with other games. It's not that much of a fun process at all. So the cabinet has just been sanded smooth on the sides here, as you can see, and I've done the Bondo work on it. There really wasn't that much Bondo work except for the control panel. The control panel, if you remember in the last video, was really chewed up, and so I did use a lot of Bondo, a lot of sanding, and you'll see that later on. Right now you can't see much of the control panel, but what I'm doing here is I'm just wiping it down with some mineral spirits, just to clean it off, clean all the dust particles from the sanding off, and get it ready so that we can lay the polyurethane on. And this was the first time that I'd done anything with polyurethane. My buddy Chris kind of swears by the stuff. I asked him before I did this what I should use, and since he's done a gazillion restorations and some of the best, if not best, I've ever seen, and he said use polyurethane. And the reason for that is that it produces a really glossy, smooth surface that the vinyl can adhere to much, much better. Apparently, the glossier the surface, the better the vinyl, the adhesive will adhere to. So that's what I decided to do here. And you'll see it turned out pretty nice, but it is a painstaking process because you have to wait for it to dry. And I used 4 coats, but it was a good experience. So, anyways, I am done here with the mineral spirits, and now I decided to whip out a tack cloth. And this is the first time I'd use a tack cloth. Normally I just take a paper towel and maybe some Simple Green and wipe it down. But I decided to use a tack cloth. Plus, I didn't want to use anything that might actually raise the wood grain, since this isn't primed or painted or anything like that. It's just the bare wood. And so I picked up a bunch of these tack cloths. Again, Chris recommended using a tack cloth. And all it is, if you're unfamiliar, is what it sounds like. It's just a piece of cloth that is very tacky, and it's just meant to pick up any of the dust particles from sanding. So it worked out pretty nice, and I'm using them a lot more now. So they're pretty cheap. They're like, I want to say they're about $3 for 6 of them or something like that. They're pretty inexpensive, and you can reuse them over and over again until the tackiness is pretty much gone. I think I used one of these several times before I tossed it away. But it's just a nice way to pick up anything without having to wet and dampen the cabinet. So again, all this prep work is what really pays off in the end, and that's what's going to save you from having to redo your work, as I've learned the hard way. But yeah, we're almost done here. I'm just being a little extra thorough before I put that first coat of polyurethane on. And as for the polyurethane, there's a couple different types you can pick up. I learned there's water-based and there's oil-based, just like paint. And I went with the oil-based. That's what Chris recommended. I've heard other people say get the water-based stuff because you don't have to wait for it to dry as long. And then there's also the whole process of how do you apply it, and opinions on that vary all over the place. I was Googling how to do this online, and there's so many different opinions on this. It's ridiculous. Your head will spin. Some people say you can use a roller, but then feather it out with a brush. Some people say just throw it on there real quick with a brush and let it sit. Some say, don't go back and forth, use single strokes, or don't use crisscross strokes, or use this or that type of stroke. It's all over the place. It's kind of take your pick what you want to believe. But I found a video on YouTube of a guy that seemed very, very knowledgeable, and it was kind of a tutorial video. And he used a natural bristled brush, and he started in the center. And you could probably find the YouTube video if you just YouTube, how to apply polyurethane. But he used a nice natural bristled brush, started from the middle, went out one direction and then overlapped in the other direction, and just did that across the entire piece of wood that he was finishing. And then he would feather it out afterwards, and you'll see me do that here. But that's the approach I chose with this. And here I'm just getting the polyurethane ready to apply. But I did go out and I spent a little money on a good brush, because you can get, all kinds of different brushes. But what they mean by the natural bristled is the bristles on those brushes, like this one you see here, they're a lot finer and softer. It's more like, it's almost like hair. It's I can't remember what animal the bristles are made from, or where they come from, but you can definitely feel a difference. So here you can see I'm just very gently, I'm just basically letting the brush do the work. I'm not using my arm hardly at all. That's what this guy recommended. So just making sure that I get a smooth coat on there, and then just taking my time and going down the length of the cabinet. You don't want to put a lot of pressure on there, because the cool thing about the polyurethane is after you put your coat on, you don't have to really worry about it being completely level, because it'll level out on its own. It's really neat, but you don't want to spend too much time aggravating it with brush strokes, because you introduce air bubbles. So you're just supposed to lightly put one even coat on as best you can, and then just move on and then let it dry. And the downside to using oil-based is that it takes 4 hours between coats for it to dry, and you have to let it dry completely before you put the next coat on. It's not like spray paint or something like that. So you can see here, this is a pretty painstaking process. And then even after this one coat, I'm going to have to do this another 3 times. So I only show, just like the vinyl removal, I only show one side of the cabinet. I'm not going to make you sit through the whole thing. But right here, what I'm doing is I'm just putting some wide masking tape on, just to catch any of the polyurethane that runs off the edge of the cabinet. I do have plastic underneath it, but what was happening on the first pass with the polyurethane, the very first couple strokes, is I noticed that it was dripping off the back, and it was hitting the back of the cabinet. Now it's the back of the cabinet. It's not the end of the world, but you don't want that stuff gumming up on the side and sticking to the cabinet. So I just use this masking tape to catch any of that stuff. And when I remove that later, any of the polyurethane that's on there, you'll see is pretty much collected on that tape. So far, so good. Now, since this was the first time I used the polyurethane, it wasn't, I think I perfected the technique on like the second or third coat. The first one did go on pretty well, but later on, I did have to do a little bit of light sanding. And I think that's pretty typical, but I think if I was going to do this again, I would have it down a lot better. But, with anything new, you learn with practice and experience. But I would definitely endorse Chris's recommendation to use this stuff. I think it's really cool. And honestly, if this cabinet didn't have dedicated side art, or it didn't have the black vinyl, if that wasn't how this cabinet originally came, I would be very tempted to just finish the wood like this and then slap the side art right over it, because it would match that Western theme. But that wasn't the case. So yeah, just taking my time, nothing too exciting here. You kind of get the idea. I probably should have sped this up a little bit once I got a little ways in here, but I just wanted you to see and get an idea of, like, in real time, how long one coat of the polyurethane takes. And once I get all the way down to the cabinet, you'll see how that feathering process works. Honestly, it's about this. It's very, very similar to laying the polyurethane on. It's just what you're doing is what it sounds like. You're feathering it out just so that you ensure that there's a smooth coat, and that won't really agitate it, because you're just doing one single stroke over the polyurethane. It's not like you're going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So But this was really I've never done anything with varnish. This is kind of the same. It's a finish, and it really is different than paint. It's got different properties. I feel like I'm pretty comfortable with paint and primer now, but this was entirely new. But I would definitely do it again. I don't know where I would use it again though. I guess I guess really if you're doing a full vinyl wrap, you could use it. Anything with a full vinyl wrap. I don't think I would if the cabinet was to be painted a certain color, obviously. But I could see why you would want to use this for anything with a full vinyl wrap. In fact, that's probably what I'll end up doing unless I'm going on laminate. You can see my apartment here is just an absolute mess, just like with Arkanoid or anything else. It doesn't take very long, I found. You do a couple things, you lay a couple tools out that you're going to, come back and reuse, and before you know it, the whole place is just a complete zoo. But that's how I operate. I kind of like all my tools and stuff spread everywhere, especially if I'm reusing them. It's actually it doesn't sound right at all, but I feel more organized when I've got everything kind of spread out. Until I have to move on to a new project. Yeah, I definitely should have sped this up a little bit. But you kind of get the idea. I think this probably took me maybe like 15 minutes. I think that's probably right. Maybe 15, 20 minutes. On this first coat, I think I'm going slower than I did on the other coats. I just wanted to be extra cautious, but I think I could have gone a little bit faster. But you can see how absolutely light the touch is with this brush. I'm not using my arm at all. I'm not putting any pressure down. And this brush is surprisingly heavy. It's got some weight to it, but you really don't need to put any pressure on there. Again, this stuff self levels, so after amount of time, the coat becomes level. It's pretty cool. I wish paint did that. That would avoid a lot of high spots when I'm using too much paint. But that's my fault. Almost to the edge here. I think the edges were the trickiest part because you get this nice coat going all the way up to the edge and all the way to the other edge, but that's where it starts to really feather out. And so there is a little bit of overlap I was finding I had to do just to make sure, like you could see there, the little tiny spot that was dry. These pants I'm wearing, these are my work pants, not work as in, going to the office to work. These are my get dirty, get paint on them pants. And so I wear them for everything. You'll see me wear them. If I'm not wearing my pajama pants, I'm wearing these. I've got they've got a lot of battle scars. I got a lot of blue overspray from when I was doing my eyes cabinet. There's holes in them. I think I think I've just about got every type of paint on them. So they're good pants to have for that. Actually, when I was doing the CompuVen novelty machines, they took some serious abuse. I think I got a lot of clear coat on there, gray paint. Okay, we're making it to the very edge here. And then I'm going to be feathering this. And I think I go the opposite direction, not like the lengthwise of the cabinet. I think that's why I ultimately decided on. Not too exciting, but I just wanted you to get an idea for how long this process takes. And then I think for the other coats, I have this all sped up, so we won't have to sit through that. And voila. So now I'm going to go through and I'm done with the polyurethane. I put the can down, and now this is called feathering. It's even a lighter touch than when I was laying it down, but it's at a steep, kind of a steeper angle. And you're just letting the brush glide across the polyurethane, and that's just another way of leveling it out, making sure that that's even across the cabinet. And I think this really helped tremendously. I don't, now that I think about it, I didn't do any coats where I didn't feather it, but every video that I came across, every tutorial recommended doing this process. And since I'm not really going over each layer of polyurethane over and over again, I don't have to worry about the air bubbles. That's the biggest thing that everyone talks about with polyurethane is you want to do it this way so that you don't introduce air bubbles, because if you get air bubbles, then you get an uneven surface and blah blah blah. It's a nightmare. So this seemed to work out pretty well. I wanted to go the opposite direction, or perpendicular to the strokes I was going before, because I thought that would be a better approach to gain this more level than if I went with the strokes the whole way. This would kind of ensure that it's almost well, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but you kind of get the idea. Like I thought in my head that this would be a better way of gaining it level in case the wood grain or the cabinet was didn't feel level one way but felt level the other way. So I don't know if that makes sense. In my mind, it made sense, and I think it worked pretty well. So, anyways, we're almost done here. And now I'm running out of arm length. I think I went on the other side of the cabinet. I can't remember because this was, this is a few months ago, and I haven't watched this since. Right now, I'm hoping to be picking up another game pretty soon here. I've got a very short list since I have very limited space in my apartment. There's probably 3 or 4 games on that short list before I'm seriously out of space. Oh, here we go. Okay, so now I switch sides. Almost there. I was very tempted. I really wanted to put this stuff on with a roller and just be done with it, but unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. I know some people say you can put on with a roller, and maybe I'll try it sometime, but just from what everything I've read has said that will introduce a lot of air bubbles. So I thought I would just go this route, play it safe. I'm sure some people will chime in and say, oh, there's a much easier way to do this, or you should do it this way. I'm always open to suggestions. I like to try new things. All right, so done with the feathering, and now we get to wait 4 hours for this thing in real time. No, I'm just kidding. Here I'm just making sure that I got every area and that it looks level. And I think that's pretty good. All right. So now this is dried. It's been 4 hours. And I've just got, I think this is like 400 grit sandpaper. Just doing a little bit of light sanding in some of the areas before I put the next coat on. But there are just a few little tiny areas that need a little fine sanding, and that was it. This stuff, it really leveled out. It was pretty cool. But yeah, there'd be like little tiny specks, kind of like a grain of sand that would need some light sanding. But otherwise, I think it turned out pretty nice. Yeah, I think I'm being a little bit extra cautious, but I think that's a good thing, especially since this is the first coat. If you have one shitty coat, especially early on, the rest of the coats are going to be crappy too, I've found. So I think paying extra close attention to the early coats are even more important to the later ones, if that makes sense. I should have sped this up too. But I don't like doing videos that are entirely like a time lapse, because that doesn't really give you a sense of how much time is involved in a project. But so in this case, I decided to leave this the way it is. But I've done some videos like that though, where the whole thing is in time lapse. The video's done in 10 minutes, and while for people like me that have short attention spans, that's a good thing. I I like to get a sense for what is all involved. Like, how long did this really take? And you don't really get that with the time lapse. All right, sand, sand, sand. I think we're almost done here, and then I will come in with a tack cloth again and take care of all that extra fine dust that I produce from sanding here. There you can see the big hole in my pants, right by the knee. All right, that's got to be close. All right, so now I'm grabbing the same tack cloth that I used earlier. I just put it in a Ziploc bag so I could reuse it. And just like before, just going to run this over the cabinet a few times, get it all ready so that we can lay some more polyurethane on the second coat, and then wait another 4 hours, and then, rinse and repeat. And I got to say that waiting that 4 hours is torture, especially when you want to move on and work on the game some more. You can't really do much of anything while you're waiting for that to dry, especially since the cabinet's on its side. So, you have to occupy yourself with other things. There's no real multitasking I've found. I mean, there are some things I could be working, I guess, on the monitor or, some sort of electronics that I had pulled out of the cabinet. But ultimately, it's 4 hours of waiting. So doing it late at night works because I can let it sit overnight once I go to bed, or I could be working on something else, or watching TV, or eating dinner, going to the gym, whatever. I try to plan it around that coat that's drying, so I don't go nuts. You can see sometimes the tack cloth is so tacky that it gets stuck on the cabinet. It's hard to use, but it really does work well. I'm surprised that I've never used a tack cloth before. It just seems, just seems so common sense. And then I think about how crude using a paper towel in like Simple Green or something is, because a lot of times you'll leave fragments of the paper towel behind. And then, like I was saying earlier, if it's a wood cabinet and you don't have a coat of anything on there, then you end up raising the grain of the wood, and that defeats the process or defeats the purpose, because then you have to sand again and get the surface smooth. So finally I decided, okay, it's time to speed this up. You've seen enough of this, and I get pretty anal when it comes to how smooth I want this cabinet to be, but you got to do what you got to do. And I guess I spent a little extra time on with the tack cloth. I think I kept feeling little fragments of dust. And sometimes I think that's all in my head. I think sometimes I don't know what the term is for that, but it's kind of like if you have your phone in your pocket and you feel like it, you get the sense that it's vibrating even though it's not. It's kind of the same thing where I feel like I keep feeling dust particles even though they're probably not there. But all right, so here we go with the second coat. I'll sped up here for you. And it's the same rinse and repeat. I'm just going with the same directions, same light strokes, because it worked really well the first time, so no sense in changing anything up. This time around, and I know you can't see it because the footage is sped up, but I'm feeling a little more confident, so I'm not taking as much time on each stroke. But yeah, same thing over and over. A little monotonous after a while, but it'll certainly pay off. I'm not sure if I had to really do 4 coats, but I am glad I did. And done with the coat. Now just feathering it out once more. And if only it went this fast in real time. But I'm definitely going to be using this more, I think. I may try the water-based stuff just to see, just for comparison purposes. Kind of like, anything else, like laying on vinyl. I like to try different things. And just kind of compare and contrast. Now, here I am outside. It was actually a nice day, so I decided this would be a good time to bring the cabinet out there and work on it outside. This is still the same side that we've been working on. It's got the 2 coats on. I'm just sanding, doing some light sanding again, getting ready for the polyurethane. This is a microfiber cloth that I'm using there, and here's the tack cloth again. I think this is actually the same tack cloth. I'm not sure if that's a different one or not. And here's just a different angle. Hopefully this helps a little bit so you can kind of get more of an idea of what I'm doing, even though there's not a whole lot to it, but maybe this vantage point helps. I don't know. Does it? And almost done. So much easier than making you sit through the whole thing, but you now get an idea of about how much time has passed. And we're just feathering once more. And there is coat number 3. Here we are late at night when I like to work. Of course, it's tough to get enough light in there so that you can see where the imperfections are, but you can pretty much feel for it. I'm using a sanding block now, one of those that you can buy that's got a grit to it already. I'm not using straight up sandpaper. I didn't show you the 4th coat. I don't know if I didn't think it would record very well, but regardless, I did do a 4th coat. And here's the control panel. You can see how much Bondo was involved to get that smooth. And here I am laying the polyurethane on. I've got a bunch of masking tape on the side so that it doesn't bunch up against the vinyl that's already on the inside edges. And I think the trickiest part was this front edge, because at some point, one of these edges, whether it's the whole control panel surface or that front part of it, at some point that's gonna be at a vertical angle, and so you've got gravity working against you. So how do you feather that properly? But it actually did work out quite well. And there you saw I already went through and I let the first coat dry, sanded it, and here I am putting on a second coat. And surprisingly, this worked pretty well. Again, if I could remove the damn control panel, it wouldn't be so challenging, but not being able to do that, you kind of have to work with what you've got. I think I probably could have gotten more even coats and less sanding if I was able to remove that control panel, because then I could do one side, let it dry, do the other, do the front side. But all things considered, it turned out quite well. Here's our third coat. And you can see on the front how much extra polyurethane, drips down from the gravity. But I was able to feather that out. And that's why I went perpendicular like this. I think that was the third coat. I don't know if I put another one on here. I don't think I did. I'm just feeling to make sure that the polyurethane is completely even. Here's my little sanding block. You can get these at any hardware store. I got these, I think, at Menards for just a few bucks. This is like equivalent to, I think, 400 grit or 320 maybe. Sometimes I like to use them, especially if I'm working in a corner where it's tough to get a piece of sandpaper. And they're just easy to use. You just pick them up and go. Just another tool. And I was really paranoid that I was getting high spots and unevenness with this front panel. And with this lighting and this angle, it looks like there's a lot of high spots, but to the touch, they're not there. It's kind of weird. I don't know if that's a wood grain or how my lighting is bouncing off of it, but you can be rest assured this is all pretty darn smooth. Yeah, I think I only recorded 3 coats. That upper edge, that front edge there, I think I'm trying to decide if I need to do more sanding, because there's a little bit of a lip. And you can kind of see there's a little separation between the top panel and that front piece of wood. And I think that's an area where, like polyurethane or paint or anything can kind of collect there. So just being a little extra paranoid, because once that control panel's on, any imperfections are going to show through it, that control panel overlay. Getting out the tack cloth. Yeah, I think that is the same one. So that gives you an idea. I think I've used the same one on a few coats. I do change it out, though, I think either after this one or coming up. Or it could be a different one. But regardless, you can get quite a few, I would say at least a few times of use out of one tack cloth. I think after I'm done here, I'm going to end it. And then we'll save all the vinyl, the decals, and all the fun stuff, the real fun stuff for the next video. So anyways, thanks for watching, subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video.